Welcome to the inner sanctum of your own mind. You have spent your entire life running from the one person you can never truly escape. Yourself. Today, my brother, we sit together in that very room Blaise Pascal warned us about, the room where all of man's misery begins, because he cannot simply stay there in silence. Before we descend into the quiet, take a moment to join our circle by liking this video and subscribing to The Elevated Within. Your presence here strengthens the collective stillness we are trying to build in a world obsessed with noise. We are about to dismantle the frantic static of the modern era to find the true, unshakable frequency of your soul. Listen to the world around you for just a moment. Even when it pretends to be quiet, there is a hum, a vibration, a low, persistent frequency of anticipation. But I'm not talking about the physical noise of the city, the hum of the refrigerator, or the distant passing of cars. I'm talking about the psychological noise, the digital scream. We live in an era where silence has been hunted down and eradicated like a virus. We have engineered a reality where every spare second of your existence, every gap in the fabric of your day, is immediately paved over with a distraction. You wait in a line for coffee, and within 2 seconds, your hand reaches into your pocket. You sit on a train, and the world outside the window is ignored in favor of the glowing rectangle in your palm. You lie in bed at night, the day finally over, the responsibilities momentarily paused, and yet the screen illuminates your face until the very second exhaustion forces your eyes shut. Why do we do this? What are we so terrified of? To understand this, we must travel back to the 17th century, long before the invention of the smartphone, the internet, or the algorithm. We must sit across from a French mathematician, physicist, and philosopher named Blaise Pascal. Pascal was a genius of the highest order, a man who understood the mechanics of the universe, yet he turned his piercing intellect toward the mechanics of the human heart. In his seminal work, Pensée, Pascal made an observation so profound, so devastatingly accurate, that it echoes louder today than it did the day he wrote it. He said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Let those words settle into the architecture of your mind. All of humanity's problems, not some, not a few, all of them. Wars, betrayals, addictions, the desperate clamor for wealth, the hollow pursuit of status, the frantic accumulation of things we do not need to impress people we do not like. Pascal traced the root of all this chaotic, destructive human behavior back to a single terrifying source, our absolute dread of being alone with our own thoughts. Pascal introduced a concept he called divertissement, diversion or distraction. He observed that humans are caught in a tragic paradox. We claim to seek peace, rest, and tranquility. We work tirelessly, telling ourselves that once we achieve a certain level of success, once we make enough money, once we secure the right partner or the right home, we will finally rest. But Pascal saw through this lie. He realized that we do not actually want peace at all. In fact, true peace, true stillness, is the thing we are most desperate to avoid. When we are finally given the rest we claim to desire, we instantly seek to destroy it with activity. Imagine a king, Pascal argued. A king has everything a man could possibly desire. He has immense wealth, absolute power, armies at his command, and every physical comfort imaginable. Yet, if you strip away his duties, his courtiers, his jesters, and his entertainment, if you leave the king completely alone in his grand chamber with nothing to do but reflect upon himself, he will become supremely miserable. He will feel the crushing weight of his own mortality. He will realize that despite his crown, he is merely a fragile creature hurtling toward the grave. Therefore, the king's court is designed not to govern, but to distract the king from himself. The hunting trips, the grand balls, the constant gossiping, all of it is a grand theater designed to keep the void at bay. My brother, you are the king in this scenario, We all are. We have built our own digital courts, populated by algorithmic jesters and virtual courtiers, designed solely to entertain us and protect us from the agonizing reality of sitting in the quiet room. When you strip away the notifications, the podcasts playing in the background while you wash the dishes, the music playing while you walk, the videos playing while you eat, what is left? When the noise stops, a terrifying confrontation begins. You are left face to face with the one entity you have spent your entire adult life avoiding. Your unfiltered, unedited self. Silence is not empty. It is not an absence of sound. Silence is a mirror, and what it reflects is often deeply uncomfortable. When you sit quietly in a room alone, the distractions fall away, and the truth of your existence rises to the surface like debris in a still pond. The quiet room forces you to listen to the ticking of the clock, and with every tick, you are reminded of your most fundamental reality. Your time is finite. You are dying, slowly, imperceptibly, but inevitably. Every moment that passes is a moment you can never reclaim. In the noise of the world, we can pretend we are immortal. We can lose ourselves in the illusion of infinite tomorrows. But in the silence, the illusion shatters. This realization of mortality brings with it the heavy burden of responsibility. If time is slipping through your fingers, what are you doing with it? In the quiet, the questions you have been suppressing begin to interrogate you. Am I living the life I was meant to live? Am I proud of the man I am becoming? Why did I compromise on my deepest values? Why do I harbor so much resentment? What am I truly afraid of? These are not the questions of a casual afternoon. These are the questions that dismantle egos. They are the questions that shatter the comfortable narratives we have constructed to justify our mediocrity. When you are constantly distracted, you never have to answer them. You can live on the surface of your life, skating over the deep, dark waters of your own soul. You can blame your boss, your ex, the economy, or the state of the world for your unhappiness. But in the quiet room, there is no one to blame. There is no one to argue with. There is only you and the stark, unvarnished truth of your own choices. The modern world has weaponized our natural aversion to the quiet room. In Pascal's time, diversion meant hunting a hare or gossiping at court. It required effort. Today, diversion is frictionless. It is delivered directly to our retinas via supercomputers resting in our pockets, powered by algorithms designed by the brightest minds of our generation, whose sole purpose is to hijack your dopamine receptors and keep you scrolling. We have surrendered our sovereignty, our attention, and ultimately, our inner lives, to the architects of the attention economy. We are willingly participating in the colonization of our own minds. Think about the physical sensation of sudden silence. Have you ever been in a crowded, noisy room when the power suddenly goes out? The abrupt absence of sound feels almost violent. There is a ringing in your ears. Your heart beats a little faster. You feel a sudden sense of vulnerability. This is exactly what happens on a psychological level when you attempt to sit in the quiet room. You experience withdrawal. Your brain, accustomed to a constant drip of cheap dopamine and rapid-fire stimuli, begins to panic. It screams for input. It generates phantom anxieties, reminding you of an email you forgot to send, a vague social misstep from 5 years ago, or a sudden urgent need to check the news. Anything, absolutely anything, to get you out of that room. But my brother, you must understand this. The pain you feel in the silence is not the silence hurting you. It is the pain of your own fractured attention trying to heal. It is the pain of a muscle that has atrophied from years of neglect being forced to bear weight again. If we are ever to elevate ourselves, if we are ever to rise above the automated, reactive existence of the modern masses, we must first learn to hold our ground in the quiet room. We must recognize diversion for what it is, a coward's retreat. The man who cannot sit quietly with himself is a man who is secretly terrified of himself. He is a man running from a ghost. And you cannot conquer the external world if you are constantly in flight from your internal world. Consider the great men of history, the philosophers, the Stoics, the ascetics, the innovators. They did not find their strength in the clamor of the crowd. They found it in the depths of solitude. They understood that the mind is like a turbulent glass of muddy water. If you keep shaking it, the water remains cloudy, dark, and impenetrable. But if you simply set the glass down upon a table in a quiet room and leave it alone, something miraculous happens. The dirt, the debris, the chaotic particles slowly begin to settle to the bottom, and the water above becomes crystal clear. This clarity is what we are after. This is the prize hidden within Pascal's room. When you withstand the initial panic, when you refuse to reach for the phone, when you stare down the anxieties and the ticking clock without blinking, a profound shift begins to occur. The frantic voice of the ego, realizing it has lost its audience, begins to quiet down. And from beneath that noise, a deeper, older, wiser voice begins to speak. It is the voice of your authentic self. The self that knows exactly what you must do. The self that carries the blueprint of your highest potential. But you cannot hear that voice over the noise of the digital scream. You have to earn the right to hear it. And you earn that right through the discipline of stillness. To master the architecture of silence is to reclaim your power. When you no longer fear the quiet room, you no longer fear yourself. And when you no longer fear yourself, the world loses its grip on you. You become immune to the cheap manipulations of the culture. You cannot be easily swayed by outrage, because your baseline is peace. You cannot be sold things you do not need to fill a void in your soul, because you have already descended into that void and found it to be not a terrifying abyss, but a wellspring of profound strength. The great escape is over. We are no longer running. We are turning around, walking back into the empty room, locking the door behind us, and taking our seat. We are choosing to meet the man in the mirror with all his flaws, his fears, and his untapped greatness. We are sitting in the discomfort until it transforms into revelation. This is the foundation upon which all elevated life is built. Without this, any success you achieve in the external world will be hollow, built on the fragile fault lines of an avoided self. You must become a master of the quiet. You must learn to look at the blank wall and see not an absence of entertainment, but the canvas of your own soul. We have stripped away the illusion. We have exposed the desperate mechanisms of diversion. We have unlocked the door to Pascal's room and stepped inside. But as we stand here in the silence, adjusting our eyes to the dimly lit reality of our own minds, we must prepare ourselves for the next realization, because the fear of the quiet room is only the first layer. As the silence deepens, we begin to realize that the noise we were running from was not just digital. It was social. We were running from the silent judgment of the void, hiding in the safety of the herd. The quiet room has stripped us of our distractions, but it has not yet stripped us of our conditioning. We are alone, but we are still carrying the phantom weight of 1,000 watchful eyes. We are still chained to the expectations of a society that demands conformity over authenticity. As we stand in the stillness, we must turn our gaze outward, to the sea of faces we left behind, and understand why their approval was so addictive in the first place. We must prepare to shatter the mirror of the crowd. You have locked the door. The screens are black, the notifications are silenced, and the physical space around you is finally devoid of movement. You have survived the initial withdrawal from the digital scream. Yet, as you sit there in Pascal's room, waiting for the profound peace you were promised, a secondary, far more insidious terror begins to creep in. You realize that although the physical room is empty, your mind is crowded. The silence has not brought emptiness. It has merely turned up the volume on the internalized voices of everyone you know. You brought the entire world into the room with you. Listen closely to the chatter in your head. It is not your voice. It is the echo of your manager's expectations. It is the lingering judgment of your peers. It is the subtle, unspoken demands of your family. It is the collective murmur of society dictating what you should have achieved by this age, what you should own, how you should look, and who you should be. You are alone, but you are still performing. You are still a prisoner of the audience. To understand this phantom audience, we must turn to the biting, brilliant mind of the 19th century Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard walked the cobblestone streets of Copenhagen and observed a tragedy unfolding around him, a tragedy that has only magnified in our modern era. He watched men and women surrender their unique, divine individuality to something he despised. He called it the crowd. Kierkegaard famously declared, "The crowd is untruth." He did not just mean a literal mob of people, he meant the psychological construct of the collective. He meant the safety of the herd. When you belong to the crowd, Kierkegaard argued, you are shielded from the terrifying responsibility of being an individual. The crowd offers a seductive bargain. Surrender your sovereignty, and in exchange, we will relieve you of the burden of figuring out your own life. The crowd tells you what is valuable. The crowd tells you what is moral. The crowd tells you what to desire and what to despise. In the crowd, you do not have to think. You only have to conform. We seek the crowd because it dilutes accountability. If you fail while doing what everyone else is doing, it is not truly your fault. It is simply the way of the world. But if you step out of the crowd, if you dare to carve your own path and you fail, the failure is entirely yours. That level of absolute responsibility is paralyzing for the modern man. And so, we huddle together in the middle of the herd, trading our infinite potential for a fragile, temporary warmth. We become fractions of humans, calculating our worth based on how well we fit into the machinery of public opinion. But here, in the quiet room, the machinery breaks down. The crowd cannot physically follow you into your solitude, and this is why the silence feels so unbearably heavy. It is not the weight of nothingness you feel. It is the weight of the masks falling off. Every day, you wear a series of carefully crafted masks. You have a mask for your workplace, the compliant, ambitious employee. You have a mask for your friends, the easygoing, entertaining companion. You have a mask for your romantic pursuits, a mask for your family, a mask for strangers on the internet. These masks are heavy, but they are useful. They protect the vulnerable core of who you really are from being seen, judged, and potentially rejected. You have worn these masks for so long that they have fused to your skin. You have forgotten where the performance ends and where the true self begins. Now, imagine an actor who has spent his entire life on stage, playing a role to thunderous applause. Suddenly, the curtain drops. The audience leaves. The lights go out. The actor is standing alone on the dark stage. There is no one to applaud. There is no one to boo. There is no script to follow. Who is he when the play is over? This is the panic of the quiet room. You are the actor, and the theater is finally empty. You cannot play the role of the successful professional because there is no one here to impress. You cannot play the role of the victim because there is no one here to pity you. The masks require an audience to exist. Without the gaze of the crowd, the personas dissolve into smoke, and you are left completely exposed, standing naked before the tribunal of your own conscience. Kierkegaard understood that this stripping away of the social self is an agonizing process. He knew that confronting the raw, unmasked version of oneself induces a very specific, profound psychological state. He called it angst, dread, or anxiety. But this is not the anxiety of modern clinical diagnoses. It is a spiritual dread. Kierkegaard made a crucial distinction between fear and dread. Fear is always directed at a specific object. You fear a dangerous animal. You fear losing your job. You fear physical pain. But dread has no object. Dread is the dizzying, nauseating feeling of looking down into the abyss of your own freedom. When you strip away the distractions of Pascal and the crowd of Kierkegaard, what remains is the existing individual. To truly exist, in Kierkegaard's terms, is not merely to breathe and consume calories. To exist is to recognize that you are a free agent, capable of making choices that have eternal significance. It is the realization that your life is not a script written by society, but a blank canvas that you and you alone must paint. This freedom is terrifying. When you are alone in the silence, you realize that nothing is holding you back but yourself. The dread of solitude is actually the dread of your own untapped potential. It is the crushing realization that you could be so much more than you currently are. You could be stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more courageous. You could build empires, master your craft, and elevate your bloodline. The only reason you have not done so is because you have chosen the comfortable anesthesia of the crowd over the painful crucible of greatness. In the quiet room, you can no longer lie to yourself about this. The silence acts as a brutal, unforgiving mirror. It reflects the compromises you have made. It shows you the dreams you have abandoned in exchange for social acceptance. It highlights the cowardly choices you disguised as practicality. You fear being alone because you fear facing the judge in the mirror. You fear the interrogation of your own soul, asking you, why have you settled for a life so far below your capabilities? We have confused connection with conformity. We believe that by immersing ourselves in the noise of the collective, we are curing our loneliness. But look around you. We are the most hyper-connected generation in human history, yet we are drowning in an epidemic of isolation. Why? Because the crowd does not offer true connection. The crowd offers assimilation. True connection can only occur between two sovereign individuals. Two people who have faced their own depths, mastered their own silence, and bring their whole authentic selves to the interaction. When you are merely a fragment of the herd interacting with another fragment of the herd, there is no connection. There is only mutual validation of your shared illusions. You are simply lonely together. To become the elevated man, you must willingly walk into the fire of Kierkegaard's dread. You must let the social masks burn away. You must sit in the discomfort of having no script, no audience, and no external validation. You must endure the withdrawal symptoms of a mind addicted to the approval of strangers. Think of the metamorphosis of a caterpillar. It does not simply grow wings and fly. It must spin a cocoon, a dark, silent, restrictive chamber. Inside that chamber, it does not just sprout new limbs. It completely dissolves. Its old body breaks down into a genetic soup before it can be rebuilt into something capable of flight. The quiet room is your cocoon. The dread, the anxiety, the feeling of losing your identity. This is the dissolution of your old self. It is the necessary destruction of the boy who lived for the crowd, so that the man who lives for his own purpose can be formed. Do not run from the dissolution. Do not reach for the door handle. Do not try to piece the masks back together. Let them fall. Let the phantom audience fade into the background. Let the echoes of society's demands die out. As you hold your ground in this desolate inner landscape, as you survive the terror of your own freedom, the nature of the silence begins to change once again. The dread eventually exhausts itself. The panic of having no one to perform for gives way to a strange, nascent sense of liberation. You begin to realize that if there is no audience, there are no expectations. If there is no script, you cannot forget your lines. You have emptied the room. You have banished the distractions and evicted the crowd. You are finally, truly alone. But this emptiness is not a void of despair. As we are about to discover, the Western mind sees emptiness as a lack of something, a terrifying vacuum to be feared. But the Eastern mind sees it entirely differently. We have torn down the false structures of the ego. Now, we must learn to inhabit the vast, fertile space that remains. We must transition from the painful isolation of the West to the profound mastery of the East. We must learn the alchemy of the void. The storm of dread has finally broken. You have sat through the initial, agonizing withdrawal of Pascal's missing distractions. You have endured the burning, humiliating dissolution of Kierkegaard's phantom crowd. The masks lie in ashes at your feet. The frantic, desperate voices of societal expectation have shouted themselves hoarse and faded into a distant, irrelevant whisper. You are still sitting in the quiet room, but something fundamental has shifted in the atmosphere. You breathe in, and the air feels lighter. You breathe out, and the crushing weight on your chest is gone. The walls of the room no longer feel like the boundaries of a prison cell. They feel like the perimeter of a sanctuary. You have crossed the threshold. You have survived the death of the artificial self. Now, we must understand the landscape you have just entered. To do this, we must turn our gaze away from the anxious, grasping philosophies of the West and look toward the ancient, unshakable stillness of the East. We must learn the alchemy of the void. The Western mind, the mind you and I were conditioned by from the moment we were born, is fundamentally terrified of empty space. We are the inheritors of an old Aristotelian concept, horror vacui, the idea that nature abhors a vacuum. Our entire civilization is built on the frantic compulsion to fill every available void. If there is an empty plot of land, we must pour concrete over it and build a tower. If there is a silence in a conversation, we panic and fill it with meaningless small talk. If there is an empty hour in our schedule, we feel guilty and immediately stuff it with productivity, entertainment, or consumption. We have been brainwashed to believe that emptiness is a flaw in the fabric of reality. We equate nothingness with death, irrelevance, and failure. We believe that to be empty is to be devoid of value. But the Eastern masters, the Zen monks, the Taoist sages, the ancient architects of consciousness, knew that this Western obsession with constant addition is a fatal trap. They understood a truth so counterintuitive, yet so profoundly liberating, that it has the power to instantly rewrite the code of your suffering. They understood that emptiness is not a lack of something. Emptiness is the source of everything. In Zen Buddhism, there is a profound concept known as mu. When translated crudely into English, mu means nothingness or non-existence. But this is a terrible translation. It implies a dead, stagnant vacuum. In truth, mu is a dynamic, pregnant, intensely vibrant emptiness. It is not the nothingness of a barren desert. It is the nothingness of a blank canvas waiting for the brush, or the nothingness of the fertile soil waiting for the seed. When a Zen master answers a student's question with the word mu, he is not saying no. He is unasking the question. He is shattering the student's false, dualistic framework and forcing him to step into the vast, open space of pure awareness. This is the alchemy we are performing in the quiet room. You are not here to empty your mind so that you can become a lifeless zombie. You are emptying your mind so that you can finally become useful. Think of the conditioning you have been subjected to as a young man in this modern era. You have been sold the lie of perpetual addition. You are told that to become valuable, to become elevated, you must constantly acquire. You must add more money to your bank account, add more muscle to your frame, add more followers to your profile, add more skills to your resume, add more contacts to your network, and add more experiences to your timeline. Your mind is treated like a digital hard drive, and you are terrified of running out of storage space. You are bloated. You are psychologically obese. You are carrying the accumulated weight of 1,000 useless opinions, 1,000,000 forgotten advertisements, and a lifetime of borrowed desires. The alchemy of the void is the radical, rebellious act of subtraction. It is the realization that true elevation does not come from accumulating more junk to tape onto your ego. True elevation comes from chipping away everything that is not you. When the great sculptor Michelangelo was asked how he created his masterpiece, the Statue of David, he reportedly said that he simply looked at the block of marble and carved away everything that was not David. The masterpiece was already inside. The beauty was already there. It was simply obscured by excess material. Your true sovereign self is the masterpiece. The noise, the distractions, the anxieties, the opinions of the crowd, these are the excess pieces of marble. The quiet room is your chisel. When you stop trying to fill the void and instead surrender to it, you undergo a profound psychological transformation. You move from the agonizing state of loneliness to the glorious state of solitude. This is perhaps the most vital distinction you will ever learn to make. Loneliness and solitude look identical from the outside. Both involve a man sitting alone in a room, but internally they are entirely different universes. The theologian Paul Tillich beautifully articulated this difference. He said, "Language has created the word loneliness to express the pain of being alone, and it has created the word solitude to express the glory of being alone. Loneliness is a parasite. It is a state of deficit. It is the gnawing, desperate feeling that you are missing a piece of yourself, and that this missing piece can only be found in the attention or presence of another human being. When you are lonely, you are a beggar. You view every interaction as an opportunity to extract validation. You are needy, malleable, and weak. Because you are terrified of the empty room, you will tolerate the intolerable just to avoid returning to it. You will stay in toxic, draining relationships because fighting with someone is still better than facing the silence. You will hang around uninspired, cynical friends who drag you down simply because they provide a warm body to sit next to. You will scroll through mindless, degrading content for hours, trading your dignity for a cheap simulation of human connection. Loneliness makes you a slave to anyone or anything that promises to distract you from yourself. Solitude, on the other hand, is an impenetrable armor. It is a state of absolute fullness. Solitude is the realization that you are complete, entire, and self-sustaining exactly as you are. When you achieve true solitude, you stop being a beggar and you become a king. You no longer need the crowd to tell you who you are, because you have spent time in the void and discovered your own immutable core. You enter into relationships not to extract value, but to share the abundance you have cultivated in the quiet. The man who has mastered solitude is the most dangerous man to the modern system. The system thrives on your loneliness. The entire consumer economy is built on the premise that you feel empty and need to buy something to feel whole. The social media algorithms are designed to exploit your fear of missing out. But what can the system sell to a man who is perfectly content, sitting in an empty room, staring at a blank wall, completely at peace with his own existence? Nothing. He is immune. He has opted out of the rat race of validation. He has found the source code of peace. To understand how this mastery is achieved, we must look to the ancient text of the Tao Te Ching, written by the sage Lao Tzu. In chapter 11, Lao Tzu offers a metaphor that perfectly encapsulates the alchemy of the void. He writes, 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Shape clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows for a room. It is the holes which make it useful. Therefore, profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. Read those words again. Let them dismantle your Western biases. Usefulness comes from what is not there. A cup is completely useless if it is solid glass. It is only the empty space inside the cup that allows it to hold water, to quench thirst, to serve a purpose. A house is useless if it is just a solid block of bricks. It is the empty space of the rooms, the nothingness contained within the walls, that allows a family to live and breathe inside it. The wheel of a cart can only spin, can only move the cart forward, because there is an empty hole in the exact center where the axle fits. Your mind is the vessel. Your consciousness is the room. If your mind is packed to the brim with the frantic energy of the modern world, if it is solid with anxieties, regrets, political outrage, pop culture trivia, and the endless chatter of the monkey mind, there is no room for genius to enter. There is no space for intuition to speak. There is no capacity to hold the heavy, beautiful responsibilities of a truly elevated life. You are a cup full of muddy water. If the universe tries to pour the pure water of inspiration into you, it will simply spill over the sides and be wasted. The alchemy of the void is the process of emptying your cup. How does this actually happen when you sit in the silence? It is not about forcing your mind to go blank. Trying to force your mind to stop thinking is like trying to smooth rough water with a flat iron. You will only disturb it more. The alchemy occurs through the gentle, detached discipline of observation. As you sit in the quiet room, the lingering echoes of your ego will try to assert dominance. The ego hates the void. The ego is a construct built entirely of past memories and future anxieties. It only exists in the realm of things and identities. In the spaciousness of the present moment, in the realm of mu, the ego begins to suffocate. So it will throw everything it has at you to get you to leave the room. It will project a memory of a time you were deeply embarrassed 5 years ago, making your heart race. It will project a terrifying image of you failing at your career 10 years from now, making your stomach tie in knots. It will tell you that sitting here is a waste of time, that you are being lazy, that you should be hustling. When this happens, you do not fight the thought. You do not argue with it. You do not judge yourself for having it. You simply observe it. You step back and watch the thought arise, peak and fade away like a cloud passing across a vast blue sky. This is the great detachment. This is the moment you realize the most profound truth of human existence. You are not your thoughts. If you can observe your thoughts, then you cannot be them. You are the observer. You are the sky in which the clouds of thought appear. The clouds can be dark, stormy, and violent. They can be light, fluffy, and pleasant. But the sky is never damaged by the clouds. The sky remains vast, untouched, and fundamentally empty. When you identify with the clouds, you are thrown around by every passing storm. When a thought of anger arises, you become angry. When a thought of fear arises, you become afraid. But when you identify with the sky, when you identify with the void itself, you achieve invincibility. You watch the anger arise, you feel its heat, and you let it pass. You watch the fear arise, you acknowledge its presence, and you let it dissolve back into the nothingness from which it came. This practice is the crucible where the boy dies and the man is born. The boy identifies with his fleeting emotions. The man rests in the unshakable stillness of his awareness. The boy runs from emptiness. The man harnesses it as his ultimate source of power. As you continue to sit in this fertile void, a miraculous restoration begins to take place. Your dopamine receptors, fried from years of overstimulation, slowly begin to heal and reset. The baseline of your nervous system drops from a state of chronic, low-grade fight or flight back to a state of deep, restorative rest. The frantic need to prove yourself to the world evaporates. In this space of mo, you strip away all the false labels. You are no longer defined by your job title, your bank balance, your relationship status, or your physical appearance. In the absolute quiet, none of those things exist. They are all external constructs. What remains is the raw, pure essence of your being. It is an essence that requires no defense, no justification, and no performance. It simply is. This is the state of zero. This is the uncarved block. From this state of profound emptiness, you gain the clarity to see your life with objective, piercing truth. Because your mind is no longer clouded by the desperate need for validation or the frantic pursuit of distraction, you can finally hear the subtle, quiet voice of your own intuition. This voice does not scream like the ego does. It whispers. It tells you, with terrifying precision, what you must do next. It points out the toxic habits you must drop. It highlights the cowardly lies you have been telling yourself. It reveals the authentic path that you are meant to walk, a path that has absolutely nothing to do with what the crowd wants for you. You have emptied the room. You have emptied the cup. You have transformed the agonizing dread of isolation into the radiant power of solitude. You have touched the void, and you have found that it is not a grave, but a womb. But we cannot stay in the quiet room forever. The monk who achieves enlightenment on the mountaintop must eventually return to the marketplace. The purpose of this profound internal work is not to turn you into a hermit who hides from the world. The purpose is to forge a man who can walk through the chaotic, noisy, demanding world without ever losing his internal center. We have cleared the ground. We have excavated the foundation down to the solid bedrock of your true self. The void has given us the perfect, empty space. Now, the real work begins. We must take the profound peace we have found in the silence and use it as the building material for a new, indestructible life. We must transition from the passive observation of the void to the active construction of an elevated reality. We must become the architects of our own internal sanctuary. We have arrived at the final threshold. You have faced the terror of the quiet room. You have watched the masks of the crowd burn away in the fires of Kierkegaard's dread. You have crossed the desolate plains of loneliness and arrived at the fertile, vibrant oasis of Zen's empty void. You have discovered that you are not the turbulent waves crashing on the surface of the ocean. You are the vast, unshakable, silent depths beneath them. But my brother, the journey of the elevated man does not end in isolation. There is a profound temptation, once you have discovered the intoxicating peace of solitude, to simply remain there. When you realize how loud, chaotic, and fundamentally absurd the modern world is, the desire to retreat into the mountains, to become a monk in a cave, or to completely disconnect from society becomes incredibly strong. You look at the people around you, still desperately dancing for the approval of the phantom audience, still frantically scrolling to avoid their own mortality, and you feel a sense of tragic detachment. You want to shut the door of the quiet room forever and leave the madness behind. But true mastery is not found in escape. The monk who achieves enlightenment on the mountaintop must eventually walk back down into the marketplace. If your peace can only exist in a perfectly silent, perfectly controlled environment, then it is not true peace. It is fragility. It is a greenhouse flower that will wither the moment it is exposed to the harsh winds of reality. The ultimate test of the alchemy we have performed is not how well you sit in an empty room, but how well you carry the emptiness of that room with you into the chaotic center of the city. We must now transition from the passive observation of the void to the active construction of a new reality. We must become the architects of the inner sanctuary. To build this architecture, we must look to the battlefields of the Roman Empire and to the mind of the man who ruled it all. Marcus Aurelius. He was the most powerful man on the face of the earth. He commanded legions, managed the economy of the known world, and dealt with plagues, betrayals, and constant warfare. His external world was a symphony of unimaginable stress and deafening noise. Yet when we read his private journals, the meditations, we do not find the frantic writings of a stressed, overwhelmed king. We find the serene, crystalline thoughts of a philosopher who was completely at peace. How did Marcus Aurelius manage this? He utilized a psychological framework that the Stoics called the Inner Citadel. The Inner Citadel is a fortress constructed entirely within the mind. It is a sanctuary that belongs only to you, heavily fortified against the opinions, judgments, and chaotic events of the outside world. Marcus Aurelius understood that he could not control the barbarians at the gates, he could not control the weather, and he could not control the treacherous whispers of his politicians. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that he could control his own mind. He built an internal architecture so robust that no matter what hell was breaking loose in his camp, he could retreat into his inner citadel, find complete silence, and make decisions from a place of grounded wisdom. You must build your own inner citadel. The quiet room you have just mastered is the foundation of this fortress. You must learn to carry the profound silence of that room within your chest, a pocket of infinite stillness that you can access at any moment, regardless of where your physical body happens to be. How do we construct this fortress in the modern age? The architecture relies on three unbreakable pillars. The first pillar is the discipline of intentionality over reactivity. The modern world is designed to make you react. A notification pings, and you react by looking. A news headline triggers outrage, and you react by arguing. A colleague makes a passive-aggressive comment, and you react with defensiveness. When you live reactively, you are a puppet, and the world holds the strings. Every external event has direct access to your emotional state. To build the inner citadel, you must sever those strings. You must place a moat between the stimulus of the world and your response to it. When the phone buzzes, you do not answer it immediately. You let the sound echo, you recognize it as an external demand, and you consciously choose whether or not to engage with it. You set the terms of engagement. You check your messages when you have decided it is time to do so, not when the algorithm demands your attention. You consume information with a specific purpose, rather than allowing a feed to indiscriminately vomit data into your consciousness. You treat your attention as the most sacred, finite resource you possess, because it is. You do not let thieves over the walls of your citadel. The second pillar is the practice of the sacred pause. You cannot spend 24 hours a day in deep meditation, but you can inject microdoses of the quiet room into your daily life. Before you walk into a difficult meeting, before you have a hard conversation with your partner, before you react to an insult, you must invoke the sacred pause. It only takes 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, you step back into the void. You detach from the ego's desperate need to win the argument or defend its pride. You observe the turbulent emotions rising within you. You let them pass like clouds, and you consult the silent, sovereign voice of your intuition. In the space of that pause, you reclaim your freedom. The philosopher Rollo May said, "Human freedom involves our capacity to pause between the stimulus and response, and, in that pause, to choose the one response toward which we wish to throw our weight." The crowd does not pause. The crowd reacts. The elevated man pauses, retreats to his citadel, and acts with terrifying precision. The third and final pillar is authentic action. When you strip away the desire for the crowd's applause, when you no longer fear the silence, your motivations radically change. You stop doing things because they look good on a resume or because they will garner likes on a screen. You begin doing things simply because they are true to the masterpiece you discovered within the marble. This means making choices that the crowd will not understand. It might mean turning down a promotion because the money is not worth the surrender of your peace. It might mean walking away from a friend group that is anchored in cynicism and gossip. It might mean dedicating years of your life in absolute obscurity to master a craft that no one else cares about, simply because the work itself makes your soul come alive. When you act from the inner citadel, you are no longer playing the world's game. You have invented your own game. And because you are the author of the rules, you can never truly lose. You become immune to criticism, because you are no longer performing for the critics. You become immune to failure, because failure is just an external result, and your worth is safely guarded behind the walls of your internal fortress. Imagine the sheer power of moving through your life in this way. Imagine walking into a crowded room, a party, or a networking event, and feeling absolutely zero pressure to perform. You do not need to be the loudest person in the room. You do not need to prove your intelligence. You do not need to scan the faces of the crowd to see if they are accepting you. You are completely comfortable in the silence, completely anchored in your own being. People notice this. They may not have the vocabulary to explain it, but they feel it. In a world full of anxious, grasping, reactive boys, a man who possesses true internal stillness exerts a massive gravitational pull. His presence is a lighthouse in a storm. Others will naturally look to him for direction because they sense that he is connected to a source of strength that the world cannot touch. This is the ultimate prize of the quiet room. You faced the terror of the void, you endured the death of the false self, and you emerged on the other side as a sovereign king of your own mind. You have stopped running from yourself, and in doing so, you have finally arrived at the only destination that ever mattered. The noise of the world will never stop. The digital scream will only grow louder. The crowd will always demand your conformity. But you are no longer a victim of these forces. You have built the architecture of silence. You carry the sanctuary within you. As we conclude this descent into the architecture of the mind, I ask you to carry this message outward. If you have found strength in the stillness we have built today, like this video and subscribe to the Elevated Within. We are building an empire of quiet strength, a brotherhood of men who refuse to let their souls be harvested by the noise. Share this sanctuary with someone who is still running from the quiet room. Stand firm in your citadel. Guard your attention with your life. And remember that the most powerful sound in the universe is the silence you have finally learned to master. Go forth, command your reality, and until we meet again, stay elevated, my brother.